Jesus makes sense of the Canaanite conquest because he is the one who conquers Canaan. Now, don't worry. In this video, I'm going to explain exactly what I mean and how this is possible. But first, I ought to say, sort of as a thesis statement, that because of this fact, the Canaanite conquest is designed to elicit an orientation toward, a dependence on, the justice of God alone. So, right off the bat, I would caution Christians to draw applications from the conquest that force your own sense of justice onto the world. Instead, the Canaanite conquest allows us to trust that God, and God alone, will bring justice. Hopefully, this video will show you exactly why. This is how Jesus conquers Canaan. Let's explore. The conquest narratives have puzzled Christians and non-Christians alike for centuries.
Conquest of Canaan, described in the book of Joshua as one of the toughest objections that can be brought against Christianity.
To be clear, do you believe that innocent children were killed by Israelites on the command of God?
Many are trying to make sense of these tantalizing tales. The story can be primarily found in the book of Joshua. However, the commands to exile the Canaanites from their land can be found throughout the Pentateuch. Take, for example, the command found on the heels of the Ten Commandments. There, in Exodus 23:31, God says, "For I will give the inhabitants of the land into your hand, and you shall drive them out before you." In response, Christian apologists have made great advancements in this particular area.
Nerd alert! Nerd alert!
Many point out how the presence of a person like Rahab, the prostitute, along with archaeological evidence, suggests that the towns conquered in the conquest were exclusively military outposts.
Military strongman!
Further, these outposts would have been Egyptian military ports, as though the conquest were some extension of the Exodus narratives. Well, many of the Christian responses do make a good deal of sense, and I don't want to downplay them in the least.
Thank you!
However, I often find myself wary to rely on these types of arguments. They all seem to be missing this one crucial and, I would argue, fundamental piece of the puzzle. Jesus. No one seems to be fitting the story of Jesus' earthly ministry into the whole equation, which is odd to me because, conspicuously, Jesus has one of the weirdest encounters in all of the New Testament with a Canaanite woman. Yet, I believe that Jesus is both the reason why the Canaanite conquest is so complicated and the answer to making sense of it all. Now, it's here where I need to do a quick plug for the 30-day free trial of Logos Bible Study software, because as we continue getting into this story, you're going to notice a lot of Bible verses and a lot of scholarly comments on those verses. And I was easily able to find all of those verses and their associated comments because of Logos Bible Study software. In the days of yore, you'd have to go to a seminary library and stew over massive commentaries all day and night. However, yore is no more, and I am passionate about bringing you accessible, high-quality Bible stuff, which is exactly what Logos is. Plus, it's super affordable, and you can get a free 30-day trial. It's only like $10 a month after that, which is cheaper than Netflix, by the way. Logos has made it so that you can get thousands of biblical resources for just $10 a month, and if you sign up today, you get 100 free resources on their mid-level package. So follow the link in the description and start your free 30-day trial of Logos Bible Study software today. First, we ought to begin with how the person of Jesus Christ traditionally serves to complicate the Canaanite conquest stories, not make sense of them. In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus says that to be like God is to love your enemies, turn the other cheek, and never be angry. This is a far cry from the Deuteronomic command to devote the Canaanites to complete destruction. You shall make no covenant with them and show no mercy to them. The two seem entirely at odds, yet an enigmatic phrase near the end of the Sermon on the Mount bears the makings of a good path forward. Jesus says, "Do not give to dogs what is holy, and do not throw your pearls before pigs, lest they trample them underfoot and turn to attack you." This bit deserves our brief attention, given that it often startles many young Christians, myself included, into thinking that perhaps we have entirely misunderstood Jesus' mission. However, this saying is totally consistent with Jesus' kingdom mission. What is holy probably refers to consecrated food, like the holy bread and other sacrificed meats, and should not be given to dogs, which were regarded as unclean animals to be fed with unclean food. In other words, Christians will be kingdom-oriented, and non-Christians, well, they won't be. Instead, we rely on God to change the hearts of persons. Which is why we become so utterly stricken when Jesus meets a dog and gives her the holy bread. The story is told in Matthew 15, and there's a parallel account that can be found in Mark 7. It's the only time in the entire New Testament where one can find the word Canaanite, and the story is as unique. Jesus intentionally makes his way up out of Israel and into Canaan. Already the echoes of Joshua reverberate, the conqueror has arrived. Will he fulfill what Joshua essentially failed to do? Well, the story takes an unexpected turn when, behold, a Canaanite woman from that region came out and was crying, "Have mercy on me, O Lord, Son of David. My daughter is severely oppressed by a demon," which ought to play like a record scratcher over our John Williams score, but don't get ahead of us. Jesus doesn't even flinch. In fact, he says, well, nothing. Jesus did not answer her a word, and his disciples came and begged him, saying, "Send her away, for she is crying out after us." He answered, "I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel." Jesus here might simply be reassuring his disciples not to worry. He'd say, "I am only here for Israel, not Canaan." We might imagine the camera then finding Matthew, who gives this knowing Jim Halpert shrug, when suddenly she came and knelt before him, saying, "Lord, help me." And he answered, "It is not right to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs." There is comfort in finding Jesus taking his own advice, at least. He gives no holy bread to dogs, like he said. Plus, like the Israelites were commanded in Exodus and Deuteronomy, he speaks no words of peace to the Canaanites, Exodus 23:32 and Deuteronomy 20:17. For what it's worth, he is remarkably consistent. Now, to be fair, the word translated dog here is not the same as in the Sermon on the Mount, so it's not like there's this direct parallel, though they are only changed by the suffix. No, the word used here is almost surely akin to like a puppy. In Matthew 7, we find this big snarling beast of a dog, but perhaps the joke that Jesus is making is that she is just a small snarling beast all the same, waiting to grow into this large ravenous wolf. She said, "Yes, Lord, yet even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from their master's table." I wonder if there was just dead silence as Peter waited for Jesus to step on her toes or something. After all, her ancestral religion was quite immoral by Israelite standards. Well, and ours, sacrificing babies, large fertility cults, a bloodlust for conquest. Yet her agreement reveals that she desires this crumb of the holy bread. Then Jesus answered her, "O woman, great is your faith. Be it done for you as you desire." And her daughter was healed instantly. Either Jesus has just entirely upended all that Israel was commanded to do by God, or Jesus has actually just made sense of the entire Canaanite conquest by revealing to us God's intent all along. Now, I believe it's the latter because of this uncouth passage that's nestled at the end of the Canaanite conquest in Joshua 11, 19, and 20. The verse reads, "There was not a city that made peace with the people of Israel except the Hivites, the inhabitants of Gibeon. They took them all in battle, for it was the Lord's doing to harden their hearts that they should come against Israel in battle in order that they should be devoted to destruction and should receive no mercy, but be destroyed, just as the Lord commanded Moses." Which yields two significant conclusions. First, every city conquered had the option to make peace with Israel and chose not to do so. Now, many might object here. God is the active agent hardening the hearts of the Canaanites, they'd say. But this is almost certainly a direct callback to the Exodus linking Canaan with Pharaoh, a conclusion that's just further enhanced by the idea that at this time in history, Canaan was merely the military pawn of the much more powerful Egypt. Regardless, the conclusion we come to with the hardness of the Canaanites is the same as it is in Exodus. God does not need to do anything to harden the hearts of humanity. He only needs to reveal the hardness of the heart that's already there. You can compare that to Exodus 7:13 if you'd like. Or to prove this, you could just ask yourself, given what you know about Pharaoh from Exodus 1 through 6, do you really think he was just going to will himself to a compassionate heart of magnanimity? No, he would not have. And the same is true for Canaan. This is precisely how John Calvin interprets this passage in his commentary. He writes, God hardens them for this very end, that they may show themselves unworthy of mercy. Hence that hardness is called his work because it secures the accomplishment of his design. When the Canaanites chose not to make peace, they were simply revealed to be who they were: sinful. This is to say, secondly, that Israel would have been on the defensive throughout much of the campaign. This is what David Firth says. It was God who was waging war and even leading the Canaanites out to war, so that in many respects, Israel was waging a defensive campaign. In the natural sin-laden hardness of their hearts, the Canaanites were actively making war on the Israelites when they could have been making peace. So likely, when we meet the Canaanite woman, we ought to have all of this backstory in mind. She's finally doing what is in her power to make peace with God. And Jesus says that because of that, her faith is exemplary. Her faith is like Jesus' kin, Rahab, another great example, by the way, to showcase the argument that we just made. Still, even without all of the historical and theological context surrounding these narratives, the problem of the Canaanite conquest really dissipates when we realize that the entire story is a picture of God's plan for salvation. The Canaanites had every opportunity to be united with God and make peace with Israel, but through the hardness of their hearts, they had revealed themselves to be haters of the God of Israel. So they continued in their immorality and let that fuel their bloodlust. We may therefore simply conclude that Canaan is a picture of the chaos that is opposed to God. Opposites, yes, but certainly not equals, mind you. A theme that's foreshadowed by the exile from Eden and then concludes all the way with the final judgment of the dragon. This theme goes straight to the heart of the Canaanite conquest. Now, many may object again by saying that regardless of how we make sense of the Canaanite conquest, it simply reveals God as immoral. Therefore, to conclude, we ought to talk a bit about how morality works in the Bible, namely how it is Christocentric, meaning that morality is all about Jesus in Christianity. Many might presuppose that morality is for making nice or ensuring civility. That might be an outcome, sure, but in truth, biblical morality exists as a picture of Jesus, a point that really completes the picture of the Canaanite conquest because it allows us to discuss the nature of hell. Regardless of what you believe about hell, it's a theme that runs throughout the Bible under the language of exile. In reality, we may say that hell is a prison designed to contain the chaos that threatens God's ordered creation. This is a common theme, and it's clearly seen in a passage like Genesis 3:22, where when Adam and Eve are kicked out, God essentially says that he is containing their chaos by exiling them from the garden because they threatened to disrupt the order of Eden. Plus, if morality exists only with Christ, and Christ is the way through to the Father, then it only makes sense that hell becomes the place of confined, disordered chaos. In other words, God is actually only just if he contains this chaos, in the same way that he's only just to contain the chaos of Canaan that threatens the ordered nation of his people. So while there might appear to be this tension between justice and grace in the Old Testament, Christ shows us that there is only harmony in the Bible. Plus, since Jesus is the image of the invisible God, then we know that these tensions exist only because we stop reading the Bible at these complicated parts and don't seek to make sense of them. But the Bible, like all of history, is Christocentric. And so by the time we meet Jesus, we make sense of the Bible. This is why Jesus is the only person who really truly makes sense of the Canaanite conquest. You could imagine it like a child who is running away from home, and God stands over her, hand on her shoulder, and says, "My daughter, you belong to me." Now for some, like Rahab and the Canaanite woman in Matthew 15, this is enough to soften even the hardest of hearts. But for others, as it will be one day, this is enough to harden the conviction that running away is the only option left. This was Bible Unbound. We'll see you next time.